I'm going to take a drink of my last vice that I have held on to, which is my Diet Dr. Pepper.
Beautiful.
I call it my primary care physician. It's
Oh,
the only
that's
one who
great.
actually listens to me. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of A Friend for the Long Haul, where I'm here today with Charlie McCone. I'm going to give a quick visual description of myself before we carry on, and then I'll ask you to do the same. I'm Beth. I am a white woman. I'm sitting in my living room on a green velvet couch. The dining room is in the background. I've got curly brown hair that I cut myself at 1 a.m. last night. Big purple glasses. I'm wearing a black v-neck sweater. I've got headphones that hide in my hair. And Tempo may make an appearance, but she is napping right now. That's my dog. Charlie?
Great. Yeah. My name is Charlie McCone. I am a white Caucasian male. I'm wearing glasses. I have medium shaggy brown hair that's due for a haircut soon. I'm wearing a cream colored vest with a collared shirt underneath, and I'm sitting in my office room with some with white walls and some pictures behind me, and yeah, all very uncool. Yes.
Whatever. Um, you're cool. But thank you for being here. You have done so much. I know people are always asking me, how do you do what you're doing? You got sick in March, so you have me beat. I'm April Fool's Day. And you've just, through this whole thing, like me, I can't stop talking about this. I can't stop trying to raise awareness to it. And I don't want anybody else to go through this. So I guess my first question to you is really what has made you unable to stop talking about this yourself and led you and guided you over the last 6 years to be now a long COVID patient advocate, part of the patient-led research collaborative leadership, contributing in the sick times? Like, you're everywhere, man.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you. I have a background of working in the nonprofit space and working in like communications areas, but I never really considered myself like a community advocate type
Hmm.
person. I worked on campaigns and I was kind of doing that work, but it was always kind of like staff work and or like volunteer work, but not like really anything kind of beyond that, even though like my values very much align with
Hmm.
all of that type of stuff. And so when people started calling me an advocate for long COVID, it's like you look around one day and it's like, I guess I am doing that shit.
Yeah.
It's not a conscious thing I think
Nope.
any of us are doing. It really just I had this moment, I think 6 to 8 months into my illness where I was like, if I don't speak up, like, I'm not gonna get any help, and it really
Yeah.
became and it makes me realize, like, that's how I think all, like, true grassroots advocacy starts is just
Yeah.
somebody voicing their needs where they're not being met, I think, uh and I think also, like, when your world is, like, annihilated and, like, all of those things that you think about, all of the inhibitions that are related to kind of, social norms or pressure or whatever, they go
Yeah.
away. At least they did for me. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really think about, is this weird to be talking about my health so publicly? Is it weird that I'm in the paper? I just was like, I need to get better. People are still getting sick. Nobody's talking about this. So I'm going to talk about it until people start listening. It was a combination of just desperation and maybe a coping mechanism. I can control the fact that I'm going to speak up about this. And I think regardless of whether I felt like people were listening or that I was changing minds, that like I was like finding community through
Yeah.
it, and I was also like it was sustaining something in me to just like not give up, on myself. Became its own, beast in a way. I
Yeah.
have other thoughts on, are we changing minds,
Mm.
and what use is it to keep, saying the same things over and over again? But, I don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. We could talk about it later as well.
I'm totally open that I have things I definitely want to talk about, but
Yeah.
this is so organic that if you want to go into that now, I have thoughts too.
let me
Up
hear
to you.
let me hear your thoughts on this, because this is something I think about all the time is
Yeah.
what's the best use, like, for my limited energy,
Mm.
and if I, what part of me, you know, is doing this for myself? What part of me is doing this because we're actually making a difference and changing minds? And so I think about that dynamic a lot, and I have come to, like, a place with it, but I wanna hear your thoughts first.
Okay. Initially, I started talking about it really early, I think September or October 2020. And Kathleen and I talked about this on one of the episodes, the first episode of the season, because it was not to find community as much as to see if I was making this up because I felt absolutely bananas
Right.
because my symptoms were presenting completely differently in a lot of ways than
Mhm.
what was being portrayed in the news. There was a good year and a half of people posting, anybody else got, is your skin falling off too? Like anybody else
Right.
can't eat? Because none of these things were expected. It was give it 2 weeks. I was lucky I got tested when I did, and you'll be fine. And then I wasn't fine. And I needed to see if anybody else wasn't fine. And I remember talking to my PCP and asking in June of 2020, do you think COVID could reactivate Epstein Barr? Because I had that like a flare in 2015. He was like, that's not how it works. So I'm
It's not.
feeling
It's not
like
how it works.
that's not how it works. He must be right. And then as it evolved, it was like another long hauler and I found out we were in Austin. So she started a Facebook group for Austin long haulers. I'm a chronic oversharer. More and more people were coming into the group. We could track it with waves, like exactly this amount of time after we have a new wave, we're going to see an influx of new people trying to join. And my Instagram changed from anybody else need a skin biopsy to here are the things I've done in the last month that felt better. I have been in a position of privilege in that I worked at one of the top research hospitals, universities, medical centers.
Mhm.
And I realized that I was in this unique position to overshare, share what I was finding, not being afraid of taking a risk with it all because what else did I have to lose at that point? And I'm fairly personable, so people listened and it just evolved from there. And I still
Right.
don't have the kind of following that a lot of other accounts do, but it's very tight knit. And
Right.
I seem to be able to connect people. And that's been a real gift. And it was initially, once I figured all that out, it was a big time rewarding way to dissociate, but still play into my trauma of needing to be of service to have value.
Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think there's a real common theme of people pleasing and self abandonment among almost every long hauler I know, tied to some form of neurodivergence or trauma or something that makes us care deeply about other people. Not everybody,
Right.
but mostly. And if I could help and connect people and share my experience and make anybody else feel less alone while maybe saving someone else from this fate if they were willing to get out of their blah and listen. That's and I think I've shifted less from you must heed these warnings to this is a group of people who can gain attention for symptomology that has been ignored for decades because we're
Mhm.
all converging together.
Yeah.
I didn't have access to education in that way. And I'm really good at taking technical stuff and translating it into regular people speak. And that all ties into the work that I do.
Right.
I work in a nonprofit disability space. Advocacy for, especially because of the political aspect of this and the way that it's been treated
Mhm.
and denied. And that's not fair.
Yeah.
And I can't shut up about it.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. For warnings, are we changing any minds? Are we doing anything? So, like, without trying to go down too deep of a rabbit hole, like, I feel like I've identified 3 things, and I try to address those 3 things now kind of in my work. So I think there's 3 dynamics that make it incredibly difficult for, incredibly frustrating, but incredibly difficult for just otherwise which I deem otherwise good and reasonable people to just accept this is happening and to respond to it. And the first one is a term I've learned is called hypocognition. I think in a few years into this, I started banging my head against the wall and being like, why is this not working? Like, I just need to find the perfect tweet, and this
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that
yeah,
and
yeah.
that will unlock, the public health utopia that I'm looking for. And so I started looking for answers, deeper. I found was reading this book called Don't Think of an Elephant. And it's basically, from my understanding, like one of the few books on persuasion and communication that use like neuroscience. Basically, hypocognition means if there is no frame of reference for a concept, if there is no existing neural circuit in the mind
Mhm.
or a concept, then the fact will not hold.
Yeah.
And so regardless of how convincing and compelling the argument is, if there is no neural circuit for it, you can't get through. And that opened up a huge, world for me and being like, aha, there is no frame of reference for long
Yeah.
COVID for
And this
people.
illness makes no sense.
And it makes no sense. And the idea that a mild infection can disable you, that's nowhere in our
Mm,
society. And so that to me, like, okay, that's one dynamic. And they also use like climate change as an early example of like in the
mm,
2000s.
yeah.
It was going through a similar process. But the solution he gives to this, which to me was very validating, was sustained public discussion. And the thought process is that if you talk about this for long enough, eventually a neural circuit will be created. It just takes a
Mm,
long time. And so that makes me feel a little bit better about banging my head against the wall because it makes me think like at least we're getting shots on the bow. The second thing was realizing that a lot of it has to do with how people just view chronic illness and disability in general.
yeah.
And I think it made me realize that the culture around chronic illness and disabilities that otherwise able people, they don't think it's going to happen to them. They just do
I
not.
didn't.
I didn't either. I didn't either. Um, I think both don't want to think it
Mm,
will happen, and also that we don't think it's going to happen. And that really like led me to Alice Wong's work
yeah.
and really realizing like the solution there is kind of reclaiming the culture around disability to create a much more of a connection to people, to reclaim the understanding of what these are, to one, have people fear it less, and two, to have people understand the dynamic experience of it as well. And so that kind of led me down that path. And that's why I think it's really important to take into consideration kind of how the disability experience intersects with long COVID when talking about it with people and how their perception
Yeah.
and understanding of disability interferes with their
Right.
ability to grasp long COVID. I don't think people like big scary problems with no solutions.
Fair. That's fair.
And so that has changed my perspective on, well, how can we start talking about long COVID in a way that isn't a dead end? The narrative that's a dead end diagnosis, there's nothing to do if you can get it. And that encouraged me to start thinking more about framing, the existing treatment solutions in a different way. And that was actually a big inspiration for the treatment guide of like, there are solutions, they're not ideal and they're
Yes.
maybe not very good, but there actually are things you can do. And so if you think there's nothing to do, that's not entirely accurate. I try to think of those 3 things when I'm
Mhm.
advocating now. Like, if I just want something to say because I think it's important, like, well, at least it checks box number 1. 2, if I'm trying to engage with somebody, like, take into consideration points, the disability framework and then also the big scary problem framework. And so I try to take into consideration those three things when advocating now, at least publicly. And so at least, I feel like I'm addressing one of the solutions of like the incredibly difficult dynamics that we're up against.
It's hard to imagine the complexity of almost any illness if you haven't experienced it. Then, if you know someone who's going through it and you care about them, I've been very hurt because I'm like, you say you love me and you
Right.
see what's happened and you don't even check in on me anymore. But I think people are genuinely terrified. I think they're
Oh yeah.
terrified of fucking up.
Yep.
I think they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. I think they're afraid of hurting your feelings. And I think they're afraid of it happening to them. And they just shut down. And then
Yes.
you become effectively, sadly, out of sight, out of mind. And it's
Mhm.
a terrible coping mechanism, but I have done it with so many other things in my life
Right.
that I can understand it, where I have just used the scare tactics. And, there is no definitive test for long COVID. There's no
Right.
treatment. The fact that there's no way to test right now
Right.
means that there's no pathway to a definitive treatment, but it's so individualized that who knows what you're going to get. It's like
Right.
Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. And I got
Right.
the shittiest box of chocolates that nobody could even comprehend until 4.5 years in when something happened outside they could see. I didn't
Right.
eat for a year. Nobody cared. I broke out with all of these lesions and spots, and they were like, well, something's really wrong with Beth.
Right.
Thanks, family. I think all of us have been so hurt, and it's scary. And you just want somebody who's not sick with it to acknowledge it.
Yes.
Everybody needs a witness. We just want to
Yes.
be witnessed. And I've said it a million times, but just to have someone who's not sick with long COVID to go, that sounds like hell. That is
Yes.
bullshit. Goes so far for me.
Mhm.
And it's really hard when you're going through the different stages of grief that we have all been through.
Absolutely.
It's madness. But you've talked about the treatment guide. You mentioned it, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. So, this is the Rhythm Long COVID treatment guide. You're co writer with Dr. Jen Curtin, who is one of the Rhythm co founders. And it's basically a roadmap to empower patients at the doctor's office to list kind of what people have found so far. There's the Treat Me study findings. But I'm also really curious personally to know how you decide who to work with and how to steer yourself with these
Right.
projects.
How it came to be at the end of 2024, I wrote an op-ed with a colleague of mine, Julia at PRC, who is a
I
total
loved,
all-star in the
I
space and
love
is
her so much.
single-handedly, moving the field forward in so many incredible ways that I can't dream of.
Yeah.
But we wrote this piece that stemmed from a discussion of like patients need more access to
Yeah.
off-label medications. We have a right to try these medications if we're willing to take, the risk. Like we feel
Uh-huh.
like we have that right, especially since our quality of life is so low, our material conditions are just disintegrating, and we're so far off, likely from proven treatments. And so, and one of the kind of headlines of that is that 1 in 5 prescriptions are already prescribed, off label.
Yeah.
And so after writing that, I kind of was thinking, okay, well, what if we change some people's minds here? Like, what if we actually did that? What would I do? Like, what would I
Right.
give these folks, to consider, these treatments that we're talking about that are on Reddit and these different research studies and case studies?
Yeah.
Like, what would I give them? And so I was thinking about like, well, are there existing guides I could give, both I could hand to a patient and then hand to a doctor and feel like this would satisfy my needs? And my answer was no. Like, I do think there are a lot of great guides out there, especially like for a physician who's willing to like take a seminar, on
Yes.
this. There are very sophisticated, important guides out there. But I was like, for the PCP who has, 15 minutes and is like, okay, you have a point, what kind of drugs are you talking about? I didn't think so. I get my care at Rhythm,
Okay.
and I am very lucky that I found a fantastic doctor at One Medical after I left that was very
Mhm.
open-minded and what is what I call a unicorn, a
Yes.
doctor who listening to patients, reading patients, reading the research and trialing, drugs in a reasonable fashion with patients. And then he was doing this so much that he actually joined Rhythm, and I got
Oh,
grandfathered
wow.
in as a patient, which is very lucky of me. And so I've become familiar with Rhythm, through that
Mhm.
process, and have had a great experience with their clinical, judgment and expertise. And I've gotten to know Jen and Ryan, who are the co-founders, through that process as
Mhm.
well. And I've had a very good experience with them. And so I kind of had this thought process at that point. Well, what if like one of the most trusted voices on the patient side came together with one of the most trusted voices on the clinician side and put out a guide that was very easy or much easier for PCPs and patients to kind of digest.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking that those two folks seem to be aligned with their feeling more esteemed institutions are very conservative and kind
Yeah.
of amount to what you would probably experience at a standard long COVID clinic.
Yes.
And then there are other guides that are liberal or,
I know.
flimsy with their evidence choices or whatever. So I approached them. I was like, I know this is a little outside your scope, but would you be willing to consider this? And they saw the need was there. And I and so we thought it would take a couple months, to hash out as well. That was the
Yeah.
other selling point. I was like, this is only gonna take a couple months. And it ended up taking most of last year and a little bit into this year. And so that's kind of how it came together. They were kind of my ideal, a great guide. And so I just feel very lucky that they saw that need and did most of the work.
Well, it's super helpful, and I really appreciate the work that everybody did on it. I also desperately wanna know what's that font?
Oh,
What is the font?
that's a great question. That was the other thing is like, what if this was designed in just a little bit more
Yes,
of a
it looks great.
friendly way? I know that like doctors don't like really fancy new websites with new products and all this type of stuff, and they like boring stuff. But I think there's a middle ground there, right?
There
Where
is.
you can meet a patient where they are and meet a doctor where they are. And I think
Yeah,
that that's a kind of a balance we try to meet as well as like, let's just make this designed and like in a nice way.
looks
Yeah.
great, but it's usable, and there's a credibility in that for
Right.
me that I think a lot of people look for,
Right.
and you guys hit that really well. A lot of people struggle with almost like a performance anxiety going into the appointment of how do I get my doctor to actually take this guide seriously?
Right. Yes. And that is going to still be a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, I think the goal of this guide was to, I think, you know, address at least three different types of things. Is one, the patients who are messaging me every single month looking for
Yeah.
something because they just got long COVID and they know that I was a part of their life beforehand and they know that I talk about this, that I may be a
Yeah.
resource. Instead of sending them 12 links, I can now send them one link.
Yes.
The the second thing is for the patients who have been in the trenches here and who think, well, if something would have worked, we would have known by now. I don't agree with that. I think a lot of different things are working for a lot of different people,
Yes.
and we just don't know who those people are yet. And the only way to find out, unfortunately, is to try all these medications and find out which
Yeah.
ones work. And the third one is to address these doctors who don't also think they're anything. And I think that's probably the toughest sell, right?
Yeah.
And so we try to format this in a way to reduce, the amount of friction a doctor thinks about as possible, which is, okay, what's like the dosing for this medication? What's like
Yes.
what's the rationale for this
Mhm.
medication? And then like, am I the first one to do this? I had the privilege to go to the Santa Fe Long COVID conference last year. And we were in the process of this. I was that was in the back of my mind. And I talked to a physician at the UCLA Long COVID clinic, and she was like, there's all these medications out there, but I don't know what they are. And I've never used them. And I
Yeah.
know patients are using them, and I'm like, not sure about them. And I said, what if you kind of had a guide that showed the evidence base and also showed you what other clinician organizations are also using the
Mm-hmm.
medication. And she's like, if I know I'm not the first person prescribing it, it makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. When I go into a doctor's office still, like, I'm very skittish about telling them I have long COVID. Like, I still have those issues, but, like, if I'm in a position where I'm still looking for a PCP to, help me with this, like, I think I would be very aggressive personally until I found somebody
Mm-hmm.
who kind of checked at least some of the boxes of, "Okay, I'll listen to you, and I'll
Yeah.
try out some of these medications." And so I think I would probably bring in, like, one of the
Yeah.
medications I'm interested in and be like, "Can you look at this one page and just tell me your thoughts on the evidence base here, and if you think it might be reasonable for me to try?" And if they
Yeah.
say no, they say no, and that's all we can do. I would probably do it over email rather than in person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to deal with, like, the potential
Yeah.
traumatizing response that they're going to give me
Right.
there.
To talk.
But I wanna fully acknowledge that this does not solve that problem,
Yeah.
that this is an effort to try and help with that problem, and I hope it can reduce some of the friction of the hesitation a lot of these PCPs have, but for the love of God, can you give me a beta blocker? For the love of God, can you give me low dose nitric? I understand if you don't wanna give me a blood thinner, even though that's the
Yep.
one drug that made the biggest difference in my life. I
Oh,
understand
really?
if you don't want to, give me some of these other more moderate, side effect profile, but, like, come on, can we start
Yeah.
somewhere? And I would also give them my op-ed on do no harm, so give me access to these drugs. I would advocate for myself until I found a PCP who's willing to listen, even though I know how, difficult that is and
Yeah.
how lucky I am and kind of having found somebody who was willing to listen to
Yeah.
me.
It's it's difficult. I remember the first time I I have a physical rehab doctor that every other doctor kind of was like, "This is who we send the weirdos to. We don't really know what to do with you." And so they sent me to him, and he was receptive to listening, but I also lied and said that I had been in a PhD program and had to stop because of my cognitive issues. But would you mind reading this research on low dose naltrexone? And I do not do as I do. I'm just anecdotally sharing what I did. But he listened. His entire demeanor changed
Amazing.
with that one line. And that is so messed up. But he listened. But to your point, he had no idea how to prescribe it for me. And he
I
put me
j
on six
Right.
milligrams to start.
Oh,
So I really appreciate, right? I really appreciate the low and slow philosophy of the guide, which recognizes that we are all going to have very different responses to every single thing. But
honestly, do whatever we have to do. Patients are having to do. I have a lot of sympathy for
yeah,
whatever means people have
yeah,
had to go through to get, to get to where they are.
yeah,
So every time do it.
yeah. And I also just remember the years of someone coming to me and being like, my mom's brother's husband's dog's cousin has still been sick for 3 weeks after, and what do you do? And I would use so many spoons to retype out everything because I didn't have the cognitive capacity to think, "I should put this together." So this just takes all of that pressure. If you're still the person who everybody is coming to and you're still typing it out, you can just share the link. I think everybody just needs a place to start.
Right.
And guides like this really help, especially when you're right. Some of the past guides have been like way too conservative or go to the farm
Unfortunately.
supply and get the ivermectin and then have that with I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but it was
Yeah,
very popular for a while.
I do. I
And
do.
and I
Yes.
was like, at what stage of desperation am I? And
Right.
I've been in a lot of them. And this feels very well, we've got a lot more science behind us at this point for this guide.
Right.
I can understand this guide. And I think the main thing is people are very I just get still nervous when I go into a doctor's office and it's a new
Yeah.
doctor and I got to rehash. all the trauma,
Right.
explain everything.
Yeah.
I don't know what their leaning is on how they even feel about this illness. And then I'm
Right.
going to be like, by the way, can I give you this? Or can you just read
Right.
this? It's so
Yeah.
hard. But I like your idea of like pick one thing, pick the thing that you've talked to your friends about, people who have, all of us have a symptom twin. Brandy Herrera and I are symptom twins. We know
Love
we're going to
Brandy.
react the same to just about every medication. So
Right.
we can talk about it. And
Right.
I mean, it's not exact, but if I'm curious about something new, I'm going to ask Brandy if she's tried it.
For me, about a couple years ago, I was at a place where I was very frustrated with this whole process
Yeah.
of I'm done trialing medications. This is not fair.
Right.
We need clinical trials. We need to know what works before we put ourselves through this. I developed a whole nother condition because of a side effect from a medication that
Sorry.
Pfizer put me on. The pitfalls of that as well. But I was in a place where I was like, I'm not trialing anything anymore until we have clinical trials. And a wonderful advocate, Julie Reimer, was like, she's an older ME advocate in terms of experience of being an advocate, not in age. But
Mm,
she was like, dude, like the only way we've gotten better is by continuing to try things. And I hate to say it, but like that's your best shot right now.
yeah.
And she may add some caveats to that, but I was just like had this moment of like, ugh, she's so right. Like I
Damn
have to keep
it.
I have to keep going and I don't want to, but that's the situation we're in. In
Yeah.
addition to that, I developed migraines in 2023 for a reason I don't totally understand,
Mm,
but it wasn't part of my original symptom profile, but they became very debilitating. And so I got plugged into a world where there is some standard of care for
yeah.
migraines. But then I started going through the treatment process and I said, wait a second, there's 30 FDA approved drugs for migraine. And the experience is the exact same that I'm going through with long COVID, which is we don't know if this drug's going to work for you, but it works for some people. So try this drug. If this one doesn't work, you go try this one. If this one doesn't
Huh.
work, you try this one. And even with 30 FDA approved drugs, that hasn't changed the treatment process, which is very similar to long COVID. So I think the other light bulb that went off for me is it would be nice if some of these drugs are FDA approved, but one, that doesn't mean they're going to work for me.
Yeah.
And two, why not start now? Because they may well be FDA approved drugs in 5 years. And if it takes 3 months to figure out if a drug works, that's like 4 drugs I get to try a year and there's like 30
Right.
drugs. Like,
Yeah.
so all those things kind of came together. I'm like, well, you know what? This isn't the only way, to pursue your care as a patient, but it is at least a very valid way,
Yeah.
to pursue your care. And so I think all of those things kind of reinforced for me the strategy of continuing to trial drugs and at least have a document that makes it easier for some patients.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been through, I still struggle
I do
with
too. I do
the
too.
weight of, I have such limited energy to then have to
Right.
use it to just prop myself up is so discouraging a lot of
Right.
days. And I don't ever want it to sound like I'm not grateful for what I have found that works, but it is exhausting. And I have definitely gone through phases of I'm not going to go to the doctor for a while. I can't deal with that. But I also think you pulling together with Rhythm and working on this is a real act of care. I truly,
Thank you.
it is because I have a much better understanding and appreciation for other people's energy now than I ever would have if I didn't have this illness. You mentioned Alice Wong, the great Alice Wong, and work like this as an act of care makes everybody else, it strengthens the whole community. It gives us
Thank you.
something to launch from when you just feel like you're floundering and nobody's tossing you a life jacket. It's really hard. So it is appreciated and it moves beyond like it's advocacy, it's care, but it also is helping people get justice because they're able to access things that they might not have known were available on or off label, just like that doctor didn't know. I I don't know what all these drugs are. I don't know what they do. How would we?
Right. Right.
Uh, so that leads us nicely into talking about your piece for the Sick Times about Alice Wong. And
Thank you.
the piece is beautiful. I cried, but I'm a good crier.
Gosh.
How can you tell everyone a little bit about how your relationship, how you came to
Yeah.
know Alice, and tell us a little bit more about how that impacted you through all of this and your work?
Yeah, definitely. So 2020, it was the summer of 2023, and I was at that point where I'm like, this isn't working. Like
Yeah.
I'm tweeting, I'm in different media articles, um, and again, like the three things I mentioned earlier, those are the things I've identified. They're obviously not the
Yeah.
only
Of
dynamic,
course.
whatever. And another big one is obviously the trauma of the pandemic for people, which makes, acknowledging anything related to COVID difficult. But like I was
Yeah.
at a point where I was like feeling very discouraged about like what I'm doing isn't working and there's got to be more to this. And maybe the answer is in the disability community. And I had very little understanding of it. And my experience up until that point was there was kind of tension between the long COVID and disability community, especially
Mhm.
online. It was like a lot of what does disability, all these people who want access have to do with me getting treatment? And there was a lot of what do all these people who only want treatment and to restore their able bodies,
Mm.
have to do with us?
Yeah.
And I was like, I understood both of those feelings, but I was like, that it feels like that's not it's not as simple as or as blunt as those things. And so I picked up Year of the Tiger and I
Yeah.
started reading it, and all of a sudden all of these like lights just started going off. The way Alice kind of tells her story of how when she first became, started interacting with the world with her disability, it just makes it so crystal clear how it's just a black and white discrimination issue, that a lot of what we're facing. And I think a lot of that is hard for us to realize because of how heavy the internalized ableism is that we're experiencing,
Oh my
and that we
god.
justify the way that we find ways to justify the way that we're treated by so many different people. But seeing how it like unfolds and how she tells her story, it's the perfect introduction, in my opinion, for somebody like trying to learn about disability issues and then get up to speed with kind of why the framework for disability justice was needed, on top of just like a
Yeah.
disability rights legal framework. Like all of that to me was very daunting, like disability justice, all of these terms. And, I'm a college graduate and it was still like, it's daunting, and
Yeah.
I can imagine that's the case for a lot of newly disabled people. And Alice was so in touch with that, of
Yeah.
how daunting it is, of how hard it is. In that book, you could just feel that. And so I messaged her on Twitter and I was like, I just want you to know I picked this up and I really love it. Thank you. And she responded, it's so nice to be in community with other disabled people in the Bay Area. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, nobody said that. Like 3 years of doing this.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, she invited me over to have tea with her and Ed Young and, some other
Oh
great
my
people.
god.
I was so, like, nervous meeting all these people, and she was just so chill. Like, she was just so, like, incredibly just, like, down to earth, and there was just, like, nothing about her, clinging to the rarefied air that she was
Yeah.
onto or anything like that. She was just such, like like, to use the word she would use, just such a homie as and we immediately I could tell we were just immediately
Yeah.
friends, and she said, "I could tell we're gonna be good friends." And that was like, "Whoa." And then we just started texting, about,
Mhm.
like, "What's going on with this person online?" and "How's your cat doing?" and all stuff, but we just kind of, like, kept the conversation going around one of the things we talked a lot about when we met was kind of that tension between the disability and long
Yeah.
COVID community and how maybe there's room to alleviate it. And through, a few weeks later, she kind of started the Pod Save John campaign and everything like
Mm.
that. And kind of, so our relationship kind of just blossomed from there, we stayed in touch and I met more of her friends, and I kind of was like, oh, there's a place for me in this community.
Mhm.
And because one, she's shown it for me and she wants to show it for the whole long COVID community. And she like two things that really resonated with me that I kind of wanted to kind of get through in this piece a little bit, which was she's like, it takes time to
Mm.
feel like to be okay with this, you know,
Yeah.
and if you're not okay with it, that's completely okay. You know, it takes a long time to come to some terms with what we're going through, and it takes time to work through your shit, what you said.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like, it took me a long time to understand disability justice. She's like, I didn't just
Yeah.
read those terms and understand it like that. She's like, it took me, you know, time for all of that to digest. And I was like, okay, thank you. Like, because this is hard for me.
Yeah.
And I think she really understood that this is hard for a lot of people and we need to give
Mhm.
them grace and we need to show them a place in the community because there's power
Yeah.
in us collectively. And that was really, I think, her incredible wisdom is understanding how to include people
Yeah.
effortlessly and
That
gracefully. I think in writing this piece and at her service, I wanted to like share, you know, these are the things that Alice did for the long COVID community. I wanted to share that with her community and because she did a lot of it behind the scenes and I wanted to honor that legacy of hers.
yeah.
And with this piece, I kind of wanted to share like, this is what Alice did for us, you know, and this is also why disability justice matters to long COVID advocacy,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of, for a lot of people, at least especially new, is what does disability justice have to do with me getting treatment?
Mhm.
And so that was really what I think I was trying to convey, you know, the best I could in the
Yeah.
piece.
It's so good, and I love that you were very honest about being like, "Suddenly I find myself, like, I'm speaking at this service, like, what the hell?" But
It's very unreal.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it was when I got asked, I was completely shocked. I had a lot of imposter syndrome for sure. And I was like,
yeah,
why the hell did she choose me? Like there was a lot of that. And it took a lot of her friends to be like, no, like you were a good friend of hers. And she also like her work in the long COVID community was very important to her legacy. And
yeah,
so it took me a while to just like come to terms with that. Like, so thank you for it was
yeah.
not like, oh, of course she asked me.
Duh.
It was a total honest shock. Yeah.
Yeah. But the well, I'm trying to think of she said, "Help is a beautiful reciprocal thing." I remember
Right.
reading somewhere, and that's the
Yes.
theme through all of this
Yes.
because we really are a lot of the time all we've got. And I think that's another thing about long COVID that's really been a steep learning curve for me and part of the grief is that trap of cure versus care. I spent a long time focused on a cure for this. What's the cure for this? Because nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to be disabled by a virus
Right.
and pick it.
Yeah.
And I now know 6 years in, having been left to fester for so long because we didn't have ideas about treatment and the damage that that did to me. There's no cure for me. There's just no cure for me. And that was hard. So hard. I think a lot of people get scared of disability justice and being involved in it because they're afraid of messing up, just like we talked about people being afraid of messing up talking to you about it. But I have so much respect for people who have been doing the work for so long and so much respect for people using their spoons.
I'm totally with you. I still am learning every day. I'm
Yeah,
still
yeah,
learning about it and I still struggle in talking about it. And I had a lot of fear in the beginning of being like, I don't want to mess up. Like,
yeah,
you know, and I don't want to take up too much space as like a white,
yeah,
you know, straight
right.
dude and like in a framework that's trying to center, you know, the most marginalized voices. But I think becoming friends with Alice gave me a huge permission structure of like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's a toxic culture, I think, of,
Mm.
the like the online long COVID and disability community is like waiting for people to mess up, waiting for people not to mask outdoors, waiting for people, all this stuff. Like to me, that's like an unfortunate toxic trait of our community, and every community has them, and we have to
Of
work on
course.
that. But I think it is scary. And I think one thing though that helped me, and then also it's scary to be like, am I ready to just be okay with this? You know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I think in thinking like one way the disability justice has helped me is like, what hurts about this? What hurts about one is the illness, the agony of the illness is unbearable.
Yeah.
The material and psychological collapse of my
Mhm.
life is very devastating. And the loss of self-worth that I
Oh,
experienced because society doesn't value me anymore
yes.
hurts. And the first thing I was able to still working on, but the one thing I feel like I have made progress in healing is no, fuck you. Like I I am I am valuable still. Like I'm not
Mhm.
going to internalize your discrimination in this. I can hurt. We can still exist in this poverty sentence that we've been exiled to with
Yeah.
this, but like I'm not going to internalize that. And that's one thing that I think disability justice has helped me like with is like, okay, I'm still going to work. I'm still going to like advocate for a cure. I'm still going
Mhm.
to advocate for better material conditions, but I'm not going to deal with your shit in the process. And that's hard.
That
But
is real hard.
that to me at least was like meeting Alice, reading her work, she empowered me so much in that
Mm.
regard to say fuck the fuckers, which was her motto.
I love that.
And and because we have enough to deal with, And
Mhm.
so I think that part has helped me a lot. And also realizing that like, yeah, the lack of material conditions is a lot to deal with disabled people being viewed as undeserving and as a moral
Yeah.
failing.
Yep.
And that's a disability justice issue. And the lack of treatment and a cure is due to the medical system and the research community being like, we don't like these chronic illness patients and we don't like these disabled patients who don't get better. So like
Yeah.
it starts to open this world of like so much of this goes right through all of this.
Yeah.
And Alice's work was trying to change that, and trying to reclaim the culture around disability as not being seen as a moral failing or just inspiration porn, but as something that's dynamic and rich and that's something people can relate to. Because when
Mhm.
people met Alice, they walked away not being scared of disability. They walked away being like, this is cool. Like, this is
Yeah.
like, there's a lot here. And that, like, she was changing the culture around it by
Mhm.
telling our story in very creative and interesting ways. And I do feel like that is like one of the most effective ways to like change minds and hearts in the long run is being able to do that. And I think for long COVID advocates, like we have to like keep that in mind as we're focusing on the numbers and the data and continuing to focus on research and
Yeah.
education, but also the culture around this determines like the immediate possibilities. And if we can change the culture, we can really open up like what's possible for us.
Yeah. And it's giving yourself permission to be messy.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
really hard because I think there is so much grief. Most of the times I've had someone hit me for not being perfect around this.
Yes.
I've been so upset and so hurt. Most of the time, it is rooted in a hurt. It is rooted in a trauma.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is rooted in a way that person has been let down by
Mhm.
someone else who they thought was one of their people.
Right.
And if I can give that space, I can move forward with it. But none
Yeah.
of us are perfect. We're all going to mess up. And I would much rather you tell me if I genuinely have messed up. Don't come and try to tell me. I have had people question my diagnoses. I have had people tell me all kinds of horrible things because my circumstance is different. And I think we really have to remember how individualized this illness is, that it seems to know how to hit us in the worst way for us independently. And my experience is going to be so different to yours. I'm going to feel different things. I'm going to present it in different ways. My ME is going to be different from yours. And it's
I
so hard.
I feel like part of building, like, a stronger community for us is creating safer spaces
Yeah.
for people to mess up, and because I mess up every day. I mess up all
Yeah.
the time. I'm sure I've messed up with something, on this podcast, but it's like, uh, that's okay. It's like we're sick, we're trying, and I
We're
think the
all
important thing,
sick.
and I think we're all human, too.
Yeah.
I think disability justice is very daunting for newly disabled people, and a lot of it is, I don't wanna mess up, and I don't know why this is for me, and
Yeah.
2, I'm scared. I'm scared of
Yeah.
messing up and being called out and getting attacked and crashing for 2 days because
Yes.
I said the wrong thing, and I'm now, which is, happens to me routinely, you
Yeah.
know, online. It happens routinely to people online, and granted, if we choose to stay on Twitter, like, we have to choose to do on Twitter. But, like, with community, with your friends, with your people,
Mhm.
I think we can do better. I really believe that, because I think the things that have hurt the most for
Mhm.
people going through this is feeling like, "Wait a second, I thought you had my back, and where are
Yeah.
you? Now you're,
Yeah.
like, taking a shot at me?" Like,
Mostly because you misunderstood what I said, but I might have also not communicated it well because I have a literal brain injury. So can we talk
exactly.
about it before you like go tell everybody that I did a
Yeah,
bad thing? Like, can you come to
and
me?
let's what are we trying to build here? Like, what are we trying to
Yeah.
change here? And,
Yeah.
like, we need each other. We're gonna disagree, but, there's this quote I read I really liked, that a group of people who all think the same thing and move in the same direction is a cult, and
Dude.
a group of people who think many different things and move in the same direction is a movement. And that's American activist Loretta Ross. And her whole shtick is like, do we really need to be focusing on arguing with people who we agree on 90% of issues with? Are we really going to win that way?
Uh,
Or do we need to focus on finding the people who agree with us on 50% of
mhm.
issues and trying to get to the direction with them? And that's something I feel like in the long COVID space
Mhm.
that we get hung up around the axle around a lot is, this person did this person did that, and it's like we are hurt. It is hard to plug in, and we are,
Yeah.
like, lashing out, but, like, I just think to myself, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to change the world in a very hard way. It's a very hard
Yeah.
way that we're trying to change the world, and we need to, like, remember that we can't do this without each other.
Use my spoons to do that.
And that's just one thing I loved about Alice so much, is, like, she called people out. She
Yeah.
did, but she called people out in a very strategic way. She didn't she ra I never saw her call out fellow disabled people. I'm sure maybe she did at some times, but that was not where she was focusing. She called out folks like Pod Save America, like Bernie
Yes.
Sanders, and she called
Yeah.
them out in a righteous way. And that, like, to me is incredibly inspiring,
Me
and,
too.
like, but when I said wrong things, when I said dumb, when I said stupid, when I said crazy, when I say these words that I'm still working on trying to
Yep.
run my place, she didn't get on my case about it. Like,
Mhm.
I would catch that later, like,
Yeah.
I'm still working on this. I still am trying to find why it doesn't feel the same. I think she really understood how to give people grace so they could find a place in the community, so we could organize together to work towards something that actually results in real change. And that's exactly what she
Yep.
did with Pod Save John. That was the first time
Mhm.
for many long COVID patients we saw the disability community,
Yep.
the COVID cautious community, and the long COVID community working together and
Yeah.
achieve something.
Yeah.
And imagine
Yeah.
if we were doing that regularly, like, if we had a clean air. I was talking with Julia Dubel the other. What if we had a clean air bill of rights? What if we were working
Yeah.
towards, that? What if we were organizing, in a more, strategic and thoughtful way? But it starts with giving each other grace,
Yeah.
and and understanding that we're all part of the same community.
Yeah. I
Not that she's left really big shoes to fill, but I think the one thing I tried to convey this piece is that we have to think about what those shoes are and how we
yeah.
fill them moving forward. And a lot of it starts with, like, giving each other grace.
Take a beat.
Yeah.
remember who you're in this with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that. That's really lovely. And I could talk to you like all day, but
To-
do you have a couple more minutes to answer the end of pod questions? Because I always have 3 questions I ask
Yes.
everybody.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the first one this season is, what do you wish the general public knew more about with long COVID or chronic illness or disability as a whole? The
What
glasses
do
are
I
off.
what do I wish the general public understood more about long COVID? I
Uh,
guess the three things I think about is just like you're still at risk. I
yeah.
know Kathleen said this, but like yes, like multiple infections, like you're still at risk. You're still rolling the dice with each infection. And so we want these tools in our lives for other
Hmm.
reasons. Like you should want your kids to go to daycare and have clean air so they're not sick
Yeah.
every week. You should want to go to work and not have to think about also like these have all these other health effects. So I wish the population would just understand they're still at risk and that these new tools of the 21st century have so many other benefits
Hmm.
for our health
Yeah.
and I wish they understood that better. Maybe we can do a little bit better job of
Yeah.
messaging that. The other thing is just how how devastating this can be. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's so hard. I wish they understood post-exertional malaise. I wish they
I know.
understood that's such a hard concept. I wish they understood that yes, it is that bad. It's that bad. It's unimaginable. You've never experienced anything like it in your life, even
Yeah.
close. I mean, may some of you people have, but it's like it is that bad. It can be that bad.
Yeah.
I wish people understood better.
Yeah. I like how your brain thinks in threes. Three's my favorite number.
Thank you. I didn't think about that.
Do you have a long COVID theme song? Does your experience, do you have a song that you've identified with through all this? Is there one that describes it?
I think so. I think it's "Losing a Whole Year" by Third Eye Blind. I remember my first year, I'm like, "It's just gonna be a year, and I'll just lose a
Yeah,
whole year." And it's such like a angsty song. I love that band, and it's a great album.
that is a good one. That's a good answer. I need to share the playlist more. I don't know. I think people hear this, but they don't know that there's a full playlist and it's
Right.
so eclectic.
I would love it.
Okay, I need to share that. That's a good reminder. Thank you for your answer. And the last one is just about community because I'm really focusing on that with this round. And is there any one specific space, group, person? I mean, Alice, obviously, but what's held you the most in terms of community through all this?
One thing she also did was she funded the something called the Spoonbill Club in the Bay Area, which is a long COVID birding group that Ed
Oh,
Young
yeah.
said. But if you get to a point where in some shape or form you can do that, like it it creates a different level of community and it creates a different level of acceptance and it creates a different level of just I got people, here. And so going to the Spoonbill Club, which, we're very fortunate to have in the Bay Area, but anywhere you can be with other like-minded people in person, whether you can do a COVID safe dinner or a COVID safe hang in the park, like it's so cathartic and healing to be in person with people. I just can't recommend it enough. And it took me way too long
Me too.
to get to that place when there was a period where I could have done it sooner. And so whenever you can get to that period, I would prioritize that. Oh,
Yeah.
so and so person tried this, but they said it in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
I get that.
that's
I,
different than them saying it over text or online. I try to prioritize it now every month,
mhm.
and it's really beautiful, yeah.
I cry every time
Oh
because
god.
it takes such pressure off. And it's so nice to feel,
Yes.
again, witnessed. And I mean, it really is just indescribable, especially when you've created these relationships in such a, the walls are gone. After
Yeah,
6 years talking to the same people, I know people's kids. It's
right.
so intimate and not in a creepy way. I guess some people maybe have been. But anyway, I know these people so well.
Right.
You can't not cry when you meet someone when your first conversation was about bowel movements.
I
It's
know.
just, there's no pretense anymore. That's all gone.
That's the disability intimacy, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
that's o only we know what this is like,
Yeah.
and being able to bond over that that creates a type of intimacy you can't get anywhere else,
Yeah.
in the world or with any other friend or family.
Yeah. And one of my absolute best friends in the world is a long hauler who lives 35 minutes away, and we can just sit in the yard and not talk.
That's
And
amazing.
that's beautiful. I don't feel like I have to fill the gap. I don't feel like I have to entertain
Right.
her. I don't feel like she expects anything of me but to be me there with her in that space. And un- it's just unlike any other friendship that I've had. It's amazing.
And that's just something I've thought about more is how can we do more of that? How can we make
Yeah.
that? How can we cultivate that? I just
Hmm.
did a masked house show, which
Oh,
was the first time many people with long COVID had been to a live music event or a place with a lot of people. They just walked
hmm.
away glowing, and it was such a good feeling. And it's been a big priority for me now also to be like, we have to we have to keep fighting. We have to
Hmm.
keep doing everything we can, but we have to start living our life as richly as we can as well, and
Yeah.
and building that community. How can we create more community for people in an easier way because of all of the amazing things that naturally spawn from that? So there's so many great things that come from that if we can
Mm,
if there's and that's something Alice realized too in
yeah.
all her infinite wisdom and with the Spoon Built Club.
Beautiful place to end it. I appreciate you doing this so much.
Oh, I
I
thank you so much for doing this.
really, really thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back because I think
Uh,
we could yap for a good
I would
long
love
while.
to. We clearly have a lot to talk about. And
Yeah.
remind me where you live.
I'm in Fort Collins in Colorado.
Okay, great. I'm in the Bay Area, San Francisco. So if I'm ever in Fort Collins, if you're ever in the
Holler.
Bay Area, please. Yeah.
Noted. I turn 50 in January and I'm trying to figure out what to do. I want to
January
do
what?
something. Second.
What?
Yeah.
That's my birthday.
Shut up.
That's my birthday.
You're the only other person my husband and I share a birthday. I'm 2 years older.
January
Shut
2nd for
up.
real. On January
Did I
2nd.
know
Yeah.
that? I don't,
I did not know. No, I don't know. I
I
didn't know
don't
that.
think I know that. Charlie,
I don't think I've only met like, I don't know, maybe one other person in my life with the same birthday. Wow. I knew
that's
we
why
had
we get it. Oh
yeah,
my gosh, that is hilarious.
we got the Capricorn
Oh
connection.
my God. We'll
Wow.
talk about that next. I'll do an
Yeah.
astrology profile for you if you want. It's one of my special interests. Thank you so much. That's so
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you for tuning in to A Friend for the Long Haul. I want to remind listeners that while our conversations may touch on medical topics, I'm not a medical professional and neither are most of our guests. The content provided here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any advice or information shared should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding any medical concerns or conditions. Additionally, I'm committed to transparency in advertising. Any advertisements or sponsored content featured in these episodes will be clearly disclosed as such. Lastly, I acknowledge that the recording of this podcast takes place on the traditional lands of the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Sioux, and the Ute peoples. Again, thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes of A Friend for the Long Haul.